Hello everyone, and welcome to the Cut Rate Commander 20k subscriber giveaway, an extra episode we're releasing to thank each and every one of our subscribers for having helped the channel reach this milestone. My name is Grazzet, and today we'll be covering and giving away a deck featuring a mount that's as dangerous to its rider as it is to its enemies, the Gitrog Ravenous ride. But before we continue, I would like to again take a moment to thank each and every single person who subscribed to the channel, as without your continued support over these past few years, we would have never gotten to this point. So, sincerely, thank you all so much. Now, as has now become tradition on this channel's giveaways, it's not just going to be the deck itself that we'll be giving away, but also accessories for the deck as we crack like stretch goals during the giveaway period, and upgrades for the deck itself as we accrue more subscribers before the end of the giveaway period as well. So be sure to stick around until the end of the video to learn how to sign up, to see what stretch goals there are to unlock, and when to check back to see if you're the lucky winner. And as always, if you'd like to go the extra mile by supporting the channel directly, please do consider donating through Buy Me a Coffee or making purchases through my Game Nerds affiliate link in the description so we can keep bringing you quality content like this. So, with that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the commander and playstyle. The Gitrog Ravenous Ride is a 6/5 frog horror mount with Trample, Haste, and Saddle 1 that costs 3 and Golgari that has the following ability. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we may sacrifice a creature that saddled it this turn. If we do, we draw X cards, then put up to X lands from our hand onto the battlefield tapped, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. Breaking down its core stats, this version of the Gitrog is sporting a decently hefty CMC, a high power average toughness stat block for its cost with built-in trample and haste to ensure it can put those stats to use by cracking in as soon as it comes down and crashing through blockers, and an ability that can repeatedly turn any creature brave enough to ride it into battle into card advantage and ramp that only gets better as the power of that creature goes up. Now, to be fair, while the potential draw and ramp that the Gitrog can provide is powerful, it is dependent on A, it actually being able to get in for combat damage, and B, us having a creature in play, preferably a high power one, that we can use to saddle and then sack to it. Though, luckily for us, the Gitrog's solid base stats and built-in keywords allow it to reliably get in for damage the turn it comes down, thereby reducing the window of opportunity our opponents have to react to it. And Golgari has no shortage of low-cost, high-stat creatures, most of which come with some sort of limitation or downside, but that won't really be a problem for us since we'll generally be sacking those creatures immediately to proc our commander's effect, netting us huge amounts of card advantage and land ramp every time our commander connects, to the point that our commander may only need to connect once to immediately take over the game with the absurd amount of value it can generate. So, as we can see, the Gitrog is at its strongest if we're able to sack creatures with gigantic stat blocks to it in order to generate us the maximum amount of card advantage and ramp, which is why in this build we'll be going all in on running the biggest stat blocks we can muster to feed its huge appetite, ranging from low-cost high-power creatures with downsides that will immediately sack to our commander for the value before the downsides become a problem, overstated creatures for their costs that we can use to generate value or swing in with alongside the Gitrog to pile on the damage, and creatures whose stats either scale with the lands we have in play or that we can scale through other means to give us even more enormous bodies to feed our commander or instead go on the beatdown path with. Then, to further supplement our commander and high-power creatures, we'll be including a small suite of ways to further empower our creatures' high power so they can be sacked for even more value or simply hit even harder, a decent selection of landfall payoffs to generate us value off of all the extra lands our commander will be getting into play for us, and a handful of ways for us to reanimate and or recur our gigantic creatures from the bin to be used over and over again, ensuring that the Gitrog and its unfortunate riders will be saddled up with all the tools they'll need to overrun our opponents with. So let's make our way back to the deserts of Thunder Junction, where we'll find the Gitrog monster running wild and doing what it does best, eating everything and anything that moves to satiate its endless appetite. Somehow, after the Phyrexian invasion, the creature had stumbled across an omen path on Innistrad, likely in search of food since there were no Phyrexians left to consume, and wound up on Thunder Junction, where it proceeded to quickly begin eating everyone and everything in its path. This, however, hasn't stopped some of the denizens of the plane from trying to wrangle the beast to make it their mount, likely inspired by the tales of Thalia having ridden the monster into battle during the Phyrexian invasion, though all that have tried so far have only succeeded in ending up as the creature's next meal. Still, there is no shortage of brave and or foolish outlaws out there who think they'll be the one to tame this mighty mount, which at least guarantees that the Gitrog won't be going hungry anytime soon. So, now that we know a bit more about the commander and playstyle, let's start looking at the deck itself by starting with the creatures. So, kicking things off with some high power, low CMC creatures with downsides that will be running for the express purposes of sacking them to our commander for huge amounts of card advantage and ramp, we'll be slotting in Hunted Horror, Hunted Troll, and Hunted Bone Brute, all of which give an opponent of our choice creature tokens when they come down, but whose incredibly impressive stat blocks for their costs make them still well worth running either as sack fodder or to simply swing in alongside our commander, with the second being quite resilient as an attacker thanks to its regeneration, and the last one being able to forgo its token gifting if we disguise it. Phyrexian Soul Gorger, Demigoth Titan, and Demigoth Woe Eater, each of which would generally have us sack creatures to get usage out of their enormous stat blocks, but we'll either be sacking them on the turn they come down in the early game to circumvent this, or have spare token bodies in the late game to make proper use of them. Rotting Regisaur, which instead would have us discard a card on each of our upkeeps, but again, will either be long gone before that becomes an issue, or we'll have so many cards in hand thanks to our commander's draw that it won't be a problem for us to pitch one. Lupine Prototype and Relic Golem, whose inability to attack or block unless certain conditions are met don't affect their ability to saddle our commander, making them respectable and cheap sack fodder. Shakedown Heavy, whose ability to let our opponents tap it down in combat to let us draw cards makes it a decent source of card advantage or additional damage in the early game before we sack it away. Pugnacious Hammer Skull, which may only be able to swing in every other turn unless we have another dinosaur in play, but is still a superb overstated body for us to sack to our commander or get in for extra damage if we need the extra reach instead. And lastly, Nessian Boar, which may provide our opponent's card advantage if it's blocked, but either A, that won't be an issue if we're only using it to draw 10 cards and get up to 10 lands into play, or B, if we do swing in with it, it will compel the defending player to use all their creatures to block it, allowing us to alpha strike in with all our other high power creatures and finish them off before the cards they draw off of it become a problem. Then, as some naturally high-power creature entrants with no downsides, we'll be running both Yargle Glutton of Urborg and Yargle and Multani, both of whom are vanilla creatures, but whose power is much higher than average for their cost, making them superb sack fodder for the Gitrog, or conditionalist extra damage to crack in alongside it, as well as Fido Titan, which may not have as high power relative to its cost compared to our previous entries, but thanks to its easy-to-proc self-reanimation, we can constantly bring it back over and over again to sack for value or to pile on the damage. Now, having covered most of our creatures with high but static power, let's switch gears onto some entrants whose power can fluctuate a bit more as the game progresses, starting with a suite of creatures who can grow alongside our land base to make the most use out of the extra land drops our commander will be generating for us, those being Multani Yavamaya's avatar, whose combination of built-in reach and trample combined with his ability to recur himself back to our hand by bouncing our lands makes him both a hard-hitting and resilient beatstick that can also get extra uses out of our landfall triggers if he's in our bin for added value. Old Man Willow and Molimo Marrow Sorcerer, which again can grow into very large threats as we grow our land base, the former coming down reasonably fast and occasionally being able to remove smaller creatures or weaken larger ones if we have extra bodies to sack to it, while the latter's much slower but whose built-in trample makes it much more reliable as a finisher to punch through blockers with, and to wrap up our land scaling entrance, Beanstalk Giant, which may cost a lot to bring down as a creature, but we can cast it much earlier through its adventure to ramp us and proc our landfall triggers while we wait to bring it down in the late game as another enormous threat. And finally, as some entrants with more miscellaneous ways to scale their stats to wrap up our high power beatsticks, We have the X spells Hormagaunt Horde, Termagaunt Swarm, and Hooded Hydra, all of which we can pump mana into to grow in size, making them great mana sinks for all the ramp our commander provides us with the first also having a built-in pseudo-landfall trigger that lets us bring it back from our bin to be used again as we make our land drops, while the latter two create token bodies equal to their size upon death to absolutely flood the board with bodies when we sack them away, as well as the hand-size scaling Psychosis Crawler, which will more often than not be a 7/7 considering all the card advantage our commander generates for us, and can grow even larger alongside the handful of ways we'll be running in this build to remove our maximum hand size limit, more on that later, but we'll be primarily running it as a way to burn out the table as we draw cards with our commander, with it being more than capable of inflicting roughly a quarter of our opponent's starting life totals every time we sack a creature to quickly close out games. So, having covered the majority of the high-power creatures we'll be running to fuel our primary game plan, let's wrap up our high-power-oriented creatures with a trio of legends that can take advantage of those big stat blocks alongside our commander. Those being Goreclaw, Terror of Calcisma, who reduces the cost of all our high-power creatures so they can hit the board even faster, while also boosting their power and granting them trample as they swing in so they can reliably take chunks out of our opponents. Galta Primal Hunger, which can easily come down as a 12/12 trampling threat for 2 green alongside our commander and one other creature to generate us enormous value or damage, and Jarad Golgari Lich Lord, who functions as an alternate win condition for us by turning our high-statted creatures into AoE life loss for our opponents, easily being able to wipe out the entire table when he comes down in the late game thanks to all the mana and high-power bodies we have access to. Then, pivoting from our high-power-centric creature entries and onto those more concerned about generating value off of all the extra lands our commander will be bringing into play for us, we'll be adding in Scoot Swarm and Rampaging Baloths, both of which generate extra bodies for us in the form of tokens as our lands come into play, the former eventually generating us an exponential number of bodies as it makes token copies of itself to overwhelm our opponents with sheer numbers, while the latter creates bigger tokens for us to build up our board with while also being a big trampling threat itself to get in for extra damage. Avenger of Zendikar, who generates even more token bodies for us, this time all at once and scaling off the lands we already have in play, and then takes advantage of any additional lands we bring down to grow those tokens into sizable threats to continue swinging in with. And lastly, Tireless Provisioner, which works exceptionally well as a source of ramp alongside our commander via its treasure generation, giving us access to immediate mana after we sacrifice a creature that we can use to cast more spells that turn, or that we can simply stockpile for later. And finally, as our last pair of creature entries, we'll be adding in some more ramp to the build in the form of Honest Rutstein, who makes all our creatures even cheaper so we can get our commander and other high-power sack fodder on board faster, while also providing one-time creature recursion as he comes down so we can reuse a particularly good creature as sack fodder one more time, and Sakura Tribe Elder, which instead provides staple land-based ramp to help speed up our mana base in a more traditional way. That covers all our creatures, so let's move on to our instants. Opening our instant category with the lone high power payoff we'll be running in it, we have Return of the Wild Speaker, which is pulling double duty here as either another way for us to use our high power creatures to generate card advantage if we need the value, or, on established boards, we can instead use it as a flash speed finisher to pump our massive creature stats even further to deliver back-breaking alpha strikes. Then, moving on to a suite of instant speed reanimation sources we'll be adding to the build so we can both cheaply protect our commander from destruction and get extra uses out of our sack fodder, we have Faint Death, Not Dead After All, Undying Evil, Undying Malice, and Supernatural Stamina. The first 4 bringing the affected creature back stronger so it can be sacked for even more value later, while the last one provides a temporary power boost to the target before it dies, incentivizing us to use it proactively to get immediate extra value out of the creature we'll be sacking. And then to close out our instant category, we'll be slotting in a small suite of removal spells to help pad our core stats in the form of Assassin's Trophy, Tear Asunder, Beast Within, and Putrefy, giving us a decent selection of spot removal that can help us deal with a wide variety of threats that could otherwise potentially throw a wrench in our beatdown-oriented game plan. That covers all our instants, so let's move on to our sorceries. Padding our core stats even further as we enter our Sorcery category, we have the lone board wipe we'll be running in this build, Mandate of Abaddon, which fits nicely into our high power build by destroying all creatures weaker than the one we target with it, generally resulting in all our opponents losing most if not all of their creature base, while ours remains mostly unscathed even if we target one of our weaker creatures due to our deck's high number of high power entries. It's then going to be ramp all the way down for the remainder of this category, with Farseek, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, 3 Visits, Cultivate, and Kodama's Reach all making it in as staple land ramp sources to help us quickly get to our commander in the early game, or get us extra landfall triggers in the mid to late game. That covers all our sorceries, so let's move on to our enchantments. Reaching our enchantments, we have a fresh wave of landfall payoffs joining our arsenal to net us even more value out of all the lands our commander and land ramp sources will be bringing into play for us, such as Roaring Earth and Retreat to Kazandu, which allow us to load up our commander or other high power creatures with +1/+1 counters as we make our land drops so they can hit even harder as they swing in, or so they can generate us more value when we sack them away, the former alternatively letting us animate a land with scalable stats with it if we need another big body in play, and the latter allowing us to gain life instead if we need to stabilize our life totals. Retreat to Hagara, which instead turns every single land we get into play into an AoE drain effect to suck the life out of our opponents while padding our own, though we can use our first land drop before combat to grant the Gitrog Death Touch, which combines nicely with its built-in trample so it can destroy any creature that blocks it for only a single point of damage while dealing the rest to our opponent's faces. Zendikar's Royal, which again gives us another way to flood our board with token bodies as we get lands into play to further build up our board with, and lastly, Spelunking, which may not have landfall proper, but does allow all our lands to come into play untapped, speeding up the ramp our commander provides considerably so we don't have to wait a full rotation in order to use it, and that's on top of also being a cantrip that can ramp us as a bonus. Then pivoting back to ways to empower and generate value off of our high power creatures, we'll be adding in Garruk's Uprising, which provides us with another source of repeatable card advantage as our high power creatures come down, and as a bonus, grants all our creatures trample, ensuring that both our hands remain full and that our high power creatures can reliably get in for damage if they can't do so under their own power. And while on the topic of high power, we'll also be slotting in Unnatural Growth, which doubles our creature stat blocks every combat phase to boost most of our creature's power into the double digits, enabling them to crack in for twice the damage, intercept attacks as doubly effective blockers, or simply be sacked away for double the card advantage and ramp. And finally, as our last enchantment entry, we'll be adding an Oversold Cemetery into our arsenal, which takes advantage of the fact we'll be constantly sacking our creatures by letting us bring back our biggest beaters again and again to either sack for more value or to get in for more damage against our opponents. That covers all our enchantments, so let's move on to our artifacts. Opening our artifacts with our last stat boosting inclusion in our build, we have the equipment Black Blade Reforged, which augments the equipped creature stats equal to the number of lands we have in play, usually turning our commander into a one-shotting machine in the late game after we've flooded the board with lands via its effect. And then closing out our artifacts with a handful of additional ramp sources to further speed up our mana base with, we'll be adding in the Mana Rock's Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Thought Vessel, and a Decanter of Endless Water, all of which bolster our mana base even further, and the latter two also removing our maximum hand size limit so we don't have to worry about overdrawing when our commander nets us 7+ cards every turn. That covers all our artifacts, so let's move on to our Planeswalkers. As the lone Planeswalker we'll be running in this build, we have Nissa of the Shadowed Boughs, whose passive landfall allows us to rapidly load her up with loyalty counters as we sack away our creatures to our commander, getting her -5 online very quickly so we may use it to either recur previously sacked creatures from our bin to be used again, or cheat creatures from our hand into play at no mana cost, all while permanently empowering those creatures with +1/+1 counters as we do so. That covers our singular Planeswalker, so let's move on to our land base. Quickly going over our mana lands, we'll be running Command Tower, Llanowar Wastes, Woodland Cemetery, Tainted Wood, Necroblossom Snarl, Twilight Mire, and Viridescent Bog, all of which tap for both our colors while either usually or always coming into play untapped to provide solid fixing without sacrificing speed to do so, alongside Haunted Mire and Woodland Chasm, which may be slow but whose basic land types makes them fetchable by our non-basic land ramp sources for added consistency. We'll then be running Reliquary Tower as our singular utility land, which gives us yet another way to ignore our maximum hand size limit so we don't waste the resources our commander nets us. And finally, we'll be running 13 Swamps and 13 Forests as our basics to close out our land base. So, now that we've covered all the cards in the deck, let's take a look at this deck's breakdown. Looking at the stats that matter to our game plan, we have 18 creatures in our 99 with 5+ base power, 4 creatures whose power scales off the lands we have in play, and 5 creatures whose power scales through other means, ensuring that our commander will have no shortage of high power sack fodder to generate value for us, and that we'll have plenty of high power beat sticks to crack in with alongside it. 4 ways to further bolster our creature stat blocks to get even more mileage out of them as we sack them, or to enable them to hit even harder in combat. 11 landfall payoffs to take advantage of all the extra lands our commander will be getting into play for us for even more value. 9 ways to recur and or reanimate our creatures so that we can both protect our commander from removal and get extra uses out of our high power creatures as they're either destroyed or sacked away. And 3 ways to remove our maximum hand size limit in order to protect ourselves from overdrawing via the insane amount of card advantage our commander can generate each turn. For general deck stats, we have 18 ramp sources, 4 card draw sources, 4 targeted removal sources, and 1 board wipe. Our ramp being much higher than average due to us needing to get to our commander as quickly as possible to start generating us value, while our draw and removal are much lower than average. The former due to our commander providing us with more than enough card advantage on its own, and the latter due to us theoretically needing less since we'll be drawing into the ones we do have more often through that card advantage. Looking at our mana curve, we have an average CMC of 3.38, leaving us with a mid-weight curve whose straightforward game plan is to simply ramp hard into a single high-power creature, then our commander, then saddle our commander with said creature and immediately sack it as the Gitrog swings in to start generating us insane amounts of draw and ramp. Then from there, it's simply a matter of deploying high power after high power threat, sacrificing 1 a turn to the Gitrog for value while the remainder pummel our opponents, with each passing turn generating us more card advantage, more ramp, more landfall triggers, and more gigantic creatures into play, until our opponents are simply overrun by our overwhelming amount of value and powerful bodies. Currently, this deck is valued at $65.31, not counting the price of basic lands or shipping. This price was calculated by using the cheapest listed marketplace price on TCG Player at the time of this recording. Now, having covered the base deck in its entirety, let's move on to the giveaway portion of the video so you can learn how to enter and how to unlock some spectacular upgrades for the final build. So, in order to enter this giveaway, you'll have to do 2 things. Firstly, you must be publicly subscribed to the channel, which you can tell by the red icon on any of the comments you make on the channel you're subscribed to. Now you'll only need to set your subscriptions to public for the duration of the giveaway to be eligible to win, so feel free to switch your status back to private if you'd like once the giveaway is over, and if you don't know how to switch your subscription status, I've included a link in the description of the video that explains how to do this. Then, once you're publicly subscribed so I can see your subscription status, all you need to do is comment on this video with the hashtag Grazzet20k giveaway in the YouTube comments. This giveaway will then be running for 2.5 weeks, ending on June 8th at midnight, where 1 lucky publicly subscribed winner will be selected at random from among the comments. The winner will then be announced on the following day via post on the community tab, link in the description once they've been announced, and will have 3 days to reach out to me via email at grazzetmtg@gmail.com to verify their identity and claim their prize. And if no one reaches out during that period, a new comment will be selected until a winner claims the prize. This giveaway is worldwide, so feel free to enter no matter where you're located, and is being funded completely out of pocket by the channel as a way for us to thank all of our loyal subscribers for having helped us reach this monumental milestone by sticking with us these past few years. Now, having covered how to enter this giveaway, let's move on to some upgrades we can unlock for it, starting with a selection of Dragon Shield accessories that can be unlocked by reaching a certain number of likes on the video itself. Who aren't sponsoring the video, but I very much like their products, and I wouldn't say no to a sponsorship if they offered me one. Anyway, if this video manages to reach 100 likes before the end of the giveaway, we'll unlock a 100 pack of Dragon Shield sealable inner card sleeves to help keep our new deck nice and protected at the game table. Then, if we can reach 200 likes, we'll unlock a pack of Power Matte dual sleeves to both match with the build's Golgari aesthetic and augment our deck's resistance to whatever spilled drinks and Cheeto dust Game Night can throw its way. Then, at the 300 like mark, we'll be throwing in a playmat featuring gorgeous art of the swamp-dwelling mist dragon Deshot so we can throw down at the table with style. And finally, if this video can crack 400 likes, we'll be adding in a black and green Nest Plus deck box to hold our newly acquired double-sleeve deck and transport it in style. Then, in order to incentivize more new subscribers to join the channel during this giveaway period, we'll be unlocking a new upgrade for the deck itself with every 100 new subscribers we get before the end of the giveaway period, or we reach 21k subscribers, whichever comes first. That means, when we reach 20.1k subscribers, we'll be swapping out Roaring Earth for the Skullspore Nexus, which comes down cheap thanks to our high-power creatures reducing its cost, and provides us with a repeatable way to double our creature's power for more value and damage, while also netting us extra high-power bodies as we sack our creatures to build up our board with. Then, at the 20.2k subscriber mark, we'll be exchanging out one of the build's basic forests for Underground Stadium to give our mana base a decent boost to its consistency without sacrificing speed. From there, at 20.3k subscribers, we'll be trading out the legend Molimo Marrow Sorcerer for the more powerful legend Zopundrel Hunger Dominus, who gives us yet another way to double up on all our creature stats every combat for double the value and damage output, this time on a body we can make indestructible relatively easily to prevent our opponents from being able to interact with it. Then, upon reaching 20.4k subscribers, we'll be replacing one of our basic swamps for the Shockland Overgrown Tomb to give our mana base another boost to its consistency, this time by including another land that's fetchable by our non-basic land ramp sources to give us even easier access to our colors. And if we're able to crack the 20.5k subscriber mark, we'll be augmenting our creature base by replacing Nessian Boar with the landfall payoff Obnixilis the Fallen, who can rapidly get out of hand as we make our land drops by growing into a gigantic beatstick and burning our opponents as he does so. Now, passing the halfway mark of our stretch goals, if we can hit 20.6k subscribers, we'll be swapping out Beanstalk Giant for Sylvala Heart of the Wilds, who provides us with both repeatable ramp and card advantage that cares about our high-power creatures to help provide more on-theme core stat improvements. Then, if the 20.7k subscriber mark is reached, we'll be benching Hooded Hydra for the new legend Bristly Bill Spinesower, who gives us another way to load up our creatures with +1/+1 counters as we get our lands into play, and, on top of that, lets us double those counters by pumping mana into him to grow our creatures even more. Then closing in on the end, if we can climb to 20.8k subscribers, we'll be trading out the landfall payoff Zendikar's Royal for the much more powerful landfall payoff Greensleeve's Marrow Sorcerer, who creates bigger tokens than his predecessor as lands come into play, and, on top of that, is a creature whose stats scale with our lands so he can crack in for massive damage alongside our other high-power creatures. Then as our penultimate stretch goal, if we can get to 20.9k subscribers that is, we'll be replacing Fido Titan with Vaultborn Tyrant, which functions as another high power payoff that draws us cards and gains us life as our high power creatures come down, with the added benefit of having to be removed twice if our opponents want to deny us the value it generates, on top of being a big trampling beatstick in its own right to pile on the damage with. And lastly, if we're able to somehow climb all the way up to 21k subscribers before the end of the giveaway, you'll have both my gratitude for having helped the channel grow so much in such a small period of time, as well as my seething rage for forcing me to replace Retreat to Kazandu with my eternal nemesis, the Great Henge, which despite my hatred is actually good here since we'll only usually be paying 2 for it thanks to our creature's high power, and provides our build with more ramp, draw, stat boosts, and life gain to help fuel our game plan with. And best of all, it won't cost you a damn thing if we're able to unlock it. Nope, instead I'll be the one footing the bill. Yep, 60 bucks. 60 bucks for a singular piece of cardboard. And you know what? Honestly, if you folks are able to get here, you deserve it. Thanks everyone for sticking around until the end of the video. Before we close out, I'd just like to take a moment to thank each and every single one of the channel subscribers for having helped us reach this point. From old channel veterans like The Lion Guy, Nick at Work, Galchu1, Matthew5692, and a bunch more that have stuck with me since the channel first started off, to new subscribers that take the time to comment on my videos or vote on the polls, as well as all the subreddits that have been so kind to let me post my content to help reach more people. This could not have been achieved without your support. So sincerely, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you all for having helped us reach this milestone, and here's to many more milestones for us to break together in the future. And with that, have a good one, folks, and stay safe.